The 10 Plagues of Egypt. Real history or divine warning. There are moments in the Bible that shake the ground beneath our feet, and the story of the 10 Plagues of Egypt is one of them. Because this is not just a story about frogs, rivers of blood, or darkness swallowing a nation. This is a story about a God who steps into human history and refuses to stay silent. Let me ask you something. Have you ever felt like life was being controlled by someone stronger than you? Like the weight on your shoulders was too heavy, too unfair, too impossible to break? Israel knew that feeling. For 400 years they lived it, and when it seemed like no one heard their cries, God did. The plagues weren't random acts of destruction. They were answers, responses, a divine declaration that said, "You are not forgotten." But here's the question that echoes from ancient Egypt to your screen today. Were the 10 plagues real events carved into history, or were they symbolic pictures meant to reveal deeper spiritual truths? And maybe the real question is, why do these plagues still speak to us thousands of years later? As we journey through this mystery together, I want you to lean in, not just with your mind, but with your heart. Because behind every plague, behind every sign and wonder, behind every dramatic moment, is a message meant for your life today. A message about power, about freedom, about justice, about a God who confronts darkness and sets his people free. Let's begin. Chapter 1. The Cry of Oppression and the God who hears. Before we talk about miracles, signs, and plagues, we have to begin with pain, because every great move of God in the Bible starts in a place of suffering, and Egypt was no different. Imagine generations of people born into slavery, waking up every day, knowing their lives belonged to someone else, hands cracked from making bricks, backs bent under the sun, no freedom, no rest, no hope. That was the world of the Israelites. They didn't have an army, they didn't have a leader, they didn't have a voice, but they had one thing Pharaoh could never take from them. They had a cry. And the Bible says something beautiful, something almost whispered in the midst of their agony. It says, God heard their groaning. Not ignored, not overlooked, he heard. This is where the story becomes personal, because you and I know what it feels like to carry burdens in silence. We know what it feels like to be crushed by things we never chose. We know what it feels like to wonder if God sees us, and yet, he does, just like he saw Israel. When Moses stood before the burning bush, the Lord said, I have seen their misery. I have heard their cries. I know their suffering. This wasn't just a mission. It was compassion. It was love in motion. The plagues didn't begin with anger. They began with the mercy of a God who refused to let oppression have the last word. And that truth reaches into your life too, because the God who heard Israel's cry still hears yours today. Chapter 2. Water to blood. A symbol, a miracle, or a warning. When the first plague struck Egypt, it didn't start with thunder. It didn't start with fire from the sky. It began with something far more terrifying, something every Egyptian depended on. The Nile. The river was their life, their food, their transportation, their God. To them, the Nile wasn't just water. It was identity, security, and power. So imagine the shock when Moses raised his staff and the river turned red. Not red like mud, not red like dust, but red like blood. Fish floated to the surface. The water stank. People ran to wells and jars, only to find they too had turned. Everything they trusted collapsed in a moment. But here is the question that echoes across the centuries. Was this a literal miracle, a natural disaster, or a symbolic message carved into the heart of history? Some historians point to red algae blooms. Some scientists propose volcanic activity or sudden climate shifts. Natural explanations are everywhere, but the Bible tells the story differently. The timing wasn't random. The purpose wasn't accidental. This was God confronting the false gods of Egypt one by one. And it wasn't just a strike against a river. It was a strike against misplaced faith. Because when God turns water to blood, The message is clear. Nothing you depend on more than me will stand. Maybe that's why this plague still speaks today. We don't worship rivers, but we do worship money, success, reputation, control, and sometimes God lets those things shake, not to punish us, but to free us. The Nile turning to blood wasn't just a miracle of judgment, it was a wake-up call, a divine warning, a reminder that the foundations of this world are fragile, but the God who stands above them is not. And just like ancient Egypt, every one of us will face moments when something we relied on suddenly collapses, when the water we thought would always flow turns still. The question is, will it turn us away from God, or will it turn us back to Him? Chapter 3. Frogs, Gnats, and Flies. When nature turns against you. If the first plague shattered Egypt's confidence in the Nile, the next waves shattered their confidence in everything else, because suddenly, nature itself felt like an enemy. It began with frogs, not a few frogs hopping by the riverbank, but frogs everywhere, in kitchens, in beds, in ovens, in bowls, frogs covering the land like a living carpet that refused to go away. At first, it almost seems humorous, but imagine the sound, imagine the smell, imagine waking up in the middle of the night to something cold and alive pressing against your skin. This was invasion, not inconvenience. And when Pharaoh begged for relief, Moses prayed, the frogs died, and Egypt was left with mountains of decaying bodies filling the air with stench. But God wasn't done. Next came the gnats, small, relentless, swarming, crawling into eyes, ears, mouths. Every breath, every step, every moment, irritation became torment. And then the flies, not gentle houseflies, but massive biting swarms that darkened the air. Flies that attacked animals, flies that infected food, flies that turned daily life into chaos. For the first time, Pharaoh's own magicians were helpless. They looked at the plague of gnats and said, "This is the finger of God." But what was the message behind these strange, overwhelming swarms? It was simple. God was showing Egypt and Israel that He alone controls creation, that He can command the smallest creature to rise in judgment, that no empire is strong enough to stop a single word spoken by the Lord. Some say these plagues were natural chain reactions, ecological collapse, Nile changes, insect cycles. But even if nature played a part, the timing was divine. Each plague happened exactly when Moses declared it, and stopped when he prayed. And here's the truth that sinks deep. When your heart hardens, even the smallest things can break your peace. A tiny problem can overwhelm your mind. A small irritation can grow into a storm. Egypt wasn't destroyed by armies. Egypt was brought to its knees by frogs, gnats, and flies, by the little things they underestimated. And sometimes, God uses the little things in our lives too. A quiet conviction, a small warning, a gentle nudge before the bigger storm comes. Because the God of the plagues is also the God who whispers first, before He ever shakes the earth. Chapter 4. Diseased livestock and boils. The cost of hardened hearts. By the time the next plagues arrived, something had already shifted in Egypt. The land was exhausted. The people were afraid. But Pharaoh, his heart was harder than ever. And that's when the fourth wave of judgment fell. This time on their animals, their cows, their donkeys, their horses, their camels, their sheep and goats. Every creature that represented strength, wealth, transportation, and survival. In one sweep, disease struck the fields, livestock collapsed, pastures grew quiet, and the empire that once boasted of power began to crumble from the inside. But notice something important. The Bible says that none of the livestock belonging to Israel died. Not one. God wasn't just punishing Egypt. He was making a distinction, a line drawn clearly between those who hardened their hearts and those protected under His promise. Even so, Pharaoh refused to bend. So God sent another plague, this time against their bodies. Moses threw ashes into the air, and boils broke out on people everywhere. Painful, burning, impossible to ignore. Even Pharaoh's magicians, the men who once mocked Moses, couldn't stand before him because their skin was covered in sores. This plague wasn't just physical, it was symbolic. It revealed what was happening inside Pharaoh's soul. A heart infected, a spirit sick with pride, a man so determined to control everything that he lost the ability to hear God's warning. And here is where the story touches us today, because if we're honest, we all know what it feels like to resist God. We know what it's like to hold on to something He's asking us to let go. A relationship, a habit, a fear, a sin, a dream we don't want God to touch. And the longer we resist, the heavier life becomes, the more it hurts. The more we feel the consequences in our minds, our bodies, our emotions. Pharaoh teaches us a painful truth. A hardened heart leads to a broken life. The livestock plague showed that what we rely on can vanish in a moment. The boils showed that the human body itself can't protect us from the effects of spiritual rebellion. But even in judgment, God's purpose was mercy. Every plague was a chance for Pharaoh to turn back. Every warning was an invitation to surrender. And the same God who confronted Egypt still calls to each of us today, not to crush us, not to punish us, but to set us free from the very things that destroy us. Chapter 5. Hail and Locusts. When the sky and the earth both declare war. By the time the next plague arrived, Egypt had already endured enough to humble any nation. But Pharaoh's heart still stood like a stone wall against God. And when the heart refuses to bend, the consequences only grow stronger. This time, the warning came with thunder in the air. Moses lifted his staff, and the sky opened. But it wasn't rain. It wasn't a gentle storm rolling over the desert. It was hail, violent, burning hail, crashing from the heavens with a force Egypt had never seen before. Lightning split the sky again and again, striking the ground like spears of fire. Trees shattered, fields burned. People ran for shelter as the sky felt like it was falling. For the first time, Pharaoh trembled. He even admitted, "I have sinned. The Lord is right." But a fearful confession is not the same as a repentant heart. The moment the hail stopped, his pride returned. And so the earth responded next. Locusts, not a swarm, but an army. A dark cloud rising over the horizon, thick enough to block the sun. Locusts poured into Egypt, devouring everything the hail had left behind. Every tree, every blade of grass, every ounce of hope for the next harvest. Egypt's greatest strength, its fertile land, was reduced to a wasteland in a matter of hours. But here's something we must not miss. Before the locusts came, God told Moses to warn Pharaoh again, not to crush him, but to give him one more chance. Because even in judgment, God offers mercy. Pharaoh's officials begged him, "Let the people go. Don't you see Egypt is ruined?" But pride is blinding. Pride convinces us we still have control, even when everything around us is collapsing. And this is the lesson buried inside the storms, hail and locusts. When God speaks and we ignore Him, life has a way of echoing the warning. The sky speaks, the earth speaks, circumstances speak, loss speaks. Sometimes the disasters in life are not signs that God has abandoned us, but signs that He is urgently calling us back. Thunder reminds us that God is powerful. Hail reminds us that God is just. Locusts remind us that what we cling to can vanish in a moment. And the whole story reminds us that pride can destroy a person long before any plague does. Pharaoh had every chance to surrender before his world fell apart, and so do we. Because the God who commands the sky and the earth is the same God who reaches for your heart today. Chapter 6. Darkness over Egypt. A plague that still speaks today. After the hail, after the locusts, after the destruction that stripped Egypt of color, strength, and pride, God sent a plague unlike anything the world had ever seen. Darkness. Not the kind that comes with sunset, not the quiet stillness of night, but a darkness so heavy, so consuming, so absolute, that the Bible says it could be felt. Imagine waking up and seeing nothing, no faint light, no silhouette, no glimmer of hope coming through a window, just a thick, suffocating blackness pressing against your face, your hands, your heart. For 3 days, Egypt froze. No one moved. No one worked. No one left their home. Fear spread through the land like ice. It wasn't just the absence of light. It was the presence of dread, a spiritual darkness made visible. But here is the detail that changes everything. While Egypt was swallowed in darkness, Israel had light in their homes. God was making a statement, a clear, unmistakable one. He was showing the world that He alone is the source of light, physical and spiritual, and that without Him, darkness wins. Some scholars say this plague might have been a sandstorm, a solar eclipse, air pollution, but no natural event explains 3 days of total darkness in one nation, while the nation next door stayed bright and untouched. This was supernatural. This was purposeful. This was God confronting the deepest idol of Egypt, the sun itself. The Egyptians worshipped Re, the sun god, but for 3 days, Re was silent, powerless, defeated. It was as if God whispered to Egypt, "You think the sun gives life, but I am the one who said, 'Let there be light.'" And here is where the plague speaks into our world today. We live in a time filled with darkness, not the kind you can touch, but the kind you can feel. Discouragement, depression, fear, confusion, loneliness. A world where people walk through life without direction, without clarity, without hope. Darkness doesn't always look like a plague. Sometimes it looks like a tired soul, a broken heart, a restless mind, a home where no peace remains, a person who smiles in public but quietly feels lost inside. But just as God gave Israel light in the midst of Egypt's darkness, He still gives light to His people today. Light in your decisions, light in your sorrow, light in your confusion, light when the world around you loses itself. This plague reveals a truth that echoes through the entire Bible. Darkness is powerful, but light is stronger. And the light that God gives, no plague, no fear, no enemy, no circumstance can extinguish. Egypt sat in darkness for 3 long days, but your darkness doesn't have to last 3 days, or 3 months, or 3 years, because the same God who spoke light into Egypt's night can speak light into yours. Chapter 7. The death of the firstborn. Justice, mercy, and the birth of Passover. And now we reach the moment no one wants to face. The moment when the story of the plagues turns from terrifying to heartbreaking. After 9 warnings, 9 chances, 9 opportunities for Pharaoh to soften his heart, God declared one final judgment, the death of the firstborn. Not just in palaces, not just in wealthy homes, but in every Egyptian household, from the highest to the lowest. This is the plague that makes people pause. This is the plague that makes people ask, why would God do this? Why judge so harshly? Why this level of pain? But before we answer those questions, we need to understand what had been happening for centuries. Egypt was not innocent. They had murdered the Hebrew babies. They had crushed an entire nation. They had mocked God again and again, and Pharaoh had watched miracle after miracle, warning after warning, mercy after mercy, and still he refused to listen. Judgment was not rushed. Judgment was not random. Judgment was the last option after every door of grace was rejected. But here is where the story shifts. Because in the middle of judgment, God made a way of escape, a way of salvation, a way of protection. It was called Passover. God told the Israelites to take a lamb, spotless, innocent, and mark their doorposts with its blood. And when the destroying angel passed through Egypt, every house covered by the blood was spared, not because Israel was better than Egypt, not because they were stronger or wiser, but because the blood of the Lamb marked them as God's own. And in that moment, something sacred was born. a picture, a prophecy, a shadow of something greater that would come thousands of years later, because the Passover lamb points directly to Jesus. Just like the lamb died so Israel could live, Jesus died so we could live. Just like the blood covered their homes, his blood covers our hearts. Just like judgment passed over Israel, eternal judgment passes over everyone who belongs to Christ. The firstborn plague wasn't simply about death, it was about deliverance. It was the night Israel was finally set free. It was the night chains broke. It was the night a nation walked out of slavery, once and for all. But there's a deeper message here. God shows us two powerful truths. First, sin has consequences, real consequences, serious consequences, consequences that cannot be ignored forever. Second, God always provides a way of salvation before judgment comes. Always, always, always. Pharaoh rejected that way. Israel embraced it, and the difference between despair and deliverance was the blood of the Lamb. Today that truth still stands. Your past can be covered. Your family can be protected. Your soul can be restored. Your future can be redeemed. Not because of who you are, but because of who Jesus is, a Savior, a Redeemer, the Lamb who takes away the sins of the world. The final plague was devastating, but it opened the door to the greatest rescue mission in human history, and it still echoes with hope for anyone willing to listen today. Chapter 8. Were the plagues real? Evidence, symbolism, and the faith question. After walking through every plague, every sign, every moment of confrontation between God and Egypt, a question rises like dust from ancient ground. Were the 10 plagues real, or were they symbolic stories meant to teach spiritual lessons? People have debated this for centuries. Some point to archaeology, some point to science, some point to ancient records that describe strange natural disasters in Egypt. Others say the plagues were poetic images, divine metaphors, or theological storytelling. But here is the truth we cannot escape. Whether the plagues were fully supernatural events, partially natural events guided by God, or symbolic pictures carried through history, their message remains the same. And that message is powerful. Let's look at the possibilities. Some historians describe unusual climate patterns in ancient Egypt, famine cycles, water contamination, insect explosions, disease outbreaks, weather shifts, darkness caused by sandstorms. It's possible God used nature like a paintbrush, painting judgment across the land at exactly the right time. Others argue that these were miracles, direct supernatural acts that broke every rule of nature. Precise timing, precise intensity, precise purpose. Nothing random, nothing accidental, nothing explainable by natural cycles. Then there's the symbolic perspective, that each plague confronted an Egyptian god, the Nile god, the frog goddess, the livestock gods, the sun god Ra, the god of fertility, the god of the sky. Every plague was a declaration, I the Lord am God, and there is no other. So what do we do with all this? We ask the real question beneath the theories. What is God trying to show us through this story? Because whether the plagues were literal miracles, symbolic judgments, or natural events used by God, with supernatural timing, the lesson is the same. God sees oppression. God judges evil. God stands against the powers that crush the innocent. And God always, always, always provides a way of salvation for those who trust Him. The plagues reveal a God who is not distant, but deeply involved. A God who listens, a God who protects, a God who rescues, a God who breaks chains no human hand can break. They also remind us that darkness, pride, and rebellion still have consequences today. Not always in fire, not always in hail, not always in rivers of blood, but in the quiet collapse of a life built away from God, in the emptiness that follows stubbornness, in the wounds left by ignoring His warnings. But the plagues also whisper something far more hopeful. If God could rescue an entire nation from the greatest empire on earth, He can rescue you too. from fear, from guilt, from sin, from the burdens you hide deep inside, from the darkness that follows you, from the pharaohs in your life, the things that try to control you. The question, were the plagues real, matters, but the question, what do they mean for my life today, matters even more. Because the God of Exodus is still the God of deliverance, still the God of justice, still the God of mercy, still the God who breaks chains, still the God who brings his people out of darkness and into freedom. And that message remains true, whether you stand in ancient Egypt or right where you are today. Conclusion. A closing that speaks to the heart. When we step back and look at everything the 10 plagues reveal, the warnings, the miracles, the darkness, the mercy, a truth rises like a flame in the night. God is not silent. He never has been, and he never will be. From the Nile turning to blood, to the darkness that swallowed Egypt, to the final night, when salvation was painted in the blood of a lamb. Every plague carries a message written across time. God sees injustice. God confronts evil. God protects his people. And God makes a way where there is no way. This isn't just a story about Egypt. It's a story about us, about every moment you've cried out for help, every time you felt trapped, every day you carried a burden that felt too heavy, every night you prayed, Lord, do you see me? Yes, he sees you, just as he saw Israel, just as he heard their cries, just as he stepped into their suffering and shattered the chains that held them. And the same God who broke Egypt's power can break whatever has been holding you captive: fear, shame, addiction, doubt, weariness, sin. Nothing is stronger than the God who parts seas and moves mountains. But maybe the deepest message of all is this: deliverance always comes through the blood of the Lamb. For Israel, it was the Passover lamb. For us today, it is Jesus, our Redeemer, our Savior, our light in every darkness. So as you close your eyes for a moment, let this truth settle gently in your heart. You are not forgotten. You are not abandoned. You are not standing in Egypt alone. God is fighting for you. God is leading you forward. God is calling you into freedom. If this message stirred something inside you, if it brought